Shabbat Shalom. I hope that those of you who came into the temple building this morning by way of the Ava Road parking lot, or if you depart a little later on through the Ava Road parking lot, that you have taken note or will take note of the beautiful pride flag that is there right by the entrance. It's absolutely beautiful, and it sends the best of messages. Rabbi Isaiah Horowitz in 16th century Prague, and eventually the land of Israel, wrote of the Hebrew word rosh in reference to God's command to count the people of Israel. The word rosh, meaning head, teaches us the importance of the Jewish people, that each is a head. Each is important in her or himself. Each Jew must feel the responsibility she or he has for her or his actions, for every action can improve the condition of the world, or heaven forbid, make it worse. Theater programs, vintage typewriters, and the people of Israel. Which one doesn't fit into that list? As I see it, they all belong in the same list because they are all objects of one's affection. All are close to one's heart, and all love to be counted. The theater program collection that currently numbers well over 1,000, and the vintage typewriters that at one time numbered around 30, and for which I have all but run out of shelf space, loved by yours truly. And the people of Israel, according to the Torah Talmudic commentator Rashi, are loved by God. Rashi's view is a justification for Torah's periodic census or accounting of the people of Israel because God takes pleasure in counting those whom God loves. My ruminations on the nature and objects of our counting flow from our Torah text for this Shabbat Bamidbar, meaning in the wilderness, also known as the Book of Numbers, and that owing to God's love for the Israelites, opens with God's command that a census be undertaken of our ancestors as they proceed on their journey under the guidance of Moses towards their promised land. Nahum Sarna, in the Jewish publication commentary on the Book of Numbers, writes, because Israel will journey through hostile territory, both natural and human, the people must be organized into ranks, and this requires a census. All males over the age of 20, other than the Levites, whom God has designated as custodians of the tabernacle, are registered according to their ancestral tribes. According to Ramban, medieval commentator, the Hebrew term in Torah to count or number is also the Hebrew word to take note of or to take a special interest in. And who among us collectors does not take a special interest in or set aside time for counting, numbering, and caring for that which we prize and have devoted so much energy and resources to? Did not God, after all, make enduring promises to Abraham, Sarah, and their descendants? Did not God go a few rounds in the ring with Jacob, whose name, Israel, translates to struggle with God? Did God not protect and redeem the imprisoned Joseph? Did God not free, after centuries of oppression, Israel and set her down on the path, far from smooth path, by the way, towards her promised land? And the great 19th century champion of neo-orthodoxy, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, adds, the census in the wilderness makes it clear that a community can only have true being in terms of the totality of its components. But at the same time, each individual member of Israel is made aware that she or he is personally responsible and is an important constituent of that totality. And just as Leviticus, the preceding book of Torah, concludes with the numbering of domestic animals, Bamidbar opens with the numbering of persons, each passing by one, beneath the protective staff and loving eye of the God of Israel. Judaism's attitude towards counting or numbering of persons is complex. Tradition teaches us that in the wake of an ill-advised census on the part of King David, a plague descended upon Israel. 10 Jewish martyrs, all rabbis, the most well-known being Akiva, were martyred by Rome. The countless, now there's an ironic term, Jews through the centuries who have been victims of persecution, ghettoization, and genocide. The tattoo numbering of Jews in the Nazi death camps. The number 6 million forever associated with the Jews murdered at the hands of the Nazis and their enablers. These are numbers of the most catastrophic kind. But at the same time, our presence here this morning is owing to the 12 tribes of our ancestor Jacob, who collectively established the nation of Israel. The 600,000 plus whom Torah teaches us were freed from servitude in Egypt. The 2 million plus, my grandparents, and many of yours included, who at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th centuries departed from Eastern Europe and Russia to create new lives for themselves in North America. Our 900 plus family of Reformed Jewish congregations in Canada and the United States. The number of member family units, each of those 900 plus congregations holds close to its heart and with which it takes pride. Excuse me. In particular, the annual enrollment of youth in their religious schools, those numbers who are the future leaders and teachers. Last night's confirmation class included in our Jewish and larger communities. Putting aside then the ambivalence towards the countering or numbering of persons, let us on this Shavuot weekend especially, as we prepare to recall and celebrate our receiving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, consider an accounting of the ways that this congregation, Holy Blossom Temple, serves to enrich the life of all who call this sacred assembly their home, and how this congregation continues every day to embrace and put into action the gifting of Torah from God. Let us account for our inspiring worship services, music, song, prayer, blessing, learning, Torah, and the vital human connectivity that our worship experience serves to generate. Let us account for our dynamic adult education programming. Something for everyone sounds like a cliche, but not when applied to the ongoing and remarkable array of learning opportunities here at this temple. It's no hyperbole for Holy Blossom to be described, as I fondly recall during the tenure of my esteemed predecessor, Rabbi Dov Marmer, as a mini university. Let us account for the energetic number of committee activities crafted to encompass every aspect of congregational, Jewish communal, and larger community life, and activities designed to ensure that no one for whom volunteerism is an imperative is left behind. Let us account for our temple singers, gifted artists, all dedicated to the elevating the spirit of our worship in other programs, and whose participation in an interfaith event this past week and in this very space left me wishing they might continue to perform for another hour or two. Let us account for our excellent youth education center that, in conjunction with our youth group of Habsti and our Shinith, dedicates itself to ensuring that our younger members are imbued with the learning and guidance with which they will ultimately make the rest of us so proud. Let us account 100. Now, there's a nice round number for the women of Holy Blossom, with whom we celebrated a century of remarkable achievement just this past week. And let us account for all the skilled and gifted professional staff, lay leaders, and my fellow clergy who, notwithstanding the challenges of the past 2+ years, keep Holy Blossom Temple humming every day. Whatever the effects the pandemic has wrought, this building has never really closed and never will. And the people who run it have never stopped being present for those who need them. Rabbi and author Lawrence Kushner remarks how rabbis seated on the bima during the high holidays take note of those who enter the sanctuaries, who has lost a loved one, who is battling illness, who has been married, who has given birth, a new face here, and an empty, though once long occupied seat over there. Clergy too, then, number persons for reasons both joyous and sorrowful. It comes with our territory. But again, in anticipation of Shavuot, as we approach another summer, and as we gaze ahead to another Jewish year of hope and promise, we number the many ways through which life at Holy Blossom, as Jews and members of the larger communities, is rendered so rich. Such is our counting of blessings, and such are the numbers that sustain us. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will.